At first, Keanu and his neighbor Gregory were polite to each other. They would wave or nod when they saw each other outside. Gregory looked like a normal man, someone who liked to be alone. But as time passed, Keanu noticed something strange. Gregory started making small, mean comments. At first, it was just little jokes about different kinds of people moving into the neighborhood. Then he complained about Hollywood changing. Keanu, who was always quiet and kind, ignored it. Then something happened that Keanu couldn't ignore. One evening, after coming home from work, Keanu saw Gregory and his friends sitting by his swimming pool. They were laughing, drinking, and acting like they owned the place. But Keanu had never invited them. Keanu walked over to them, calm but serious. He asked what they were doing. Gregory just smiled and said, "We're just enjoying the perks of the neighborhood. We thought you'd be okay with it." But that wasn't the worst part. As Keanu told them to leave, Gregory laughed and mumbled, "I guess even rich people still get upset over small things." Keanu stood there for a moment. He didn't yell. He didn't get angry. He just looked at Gregory and said, "Please leave." Gregory and his friends grabbed their things and walked away, still laughing. But Keanu wasn't upset about the trespassing. It was something deeper. It was a reminder that, no matter how kind he was, some people would still see him in a bad way. That night, Keanu sat by his pool alone. He thought about everything. He had been through so much pain in his life. He had lost people he loved. But he had always tried to be kind and rise above the cruelty of the world. This time, though, something felt different. The next morning, Keanu did something unexpected. He didn't call his lawyer or report Gregory to the neighborhood council. Instead, he invited some friends over. But not celebrity friends. These were people he had helped in small ways over the years. There was a musician whose guitar Keanu had paid to fix. A retired stuntman whose hospital bills Keanu had secretly covered. An elderly couple down the street whose groceries Keanu always helped carry. They all gathered in his backyard by the pool, not for a party but to spend time together. The backyard was filled with laughter, not the fake kind that Gregory and his friends had, but real, warm laughter. The sound of kindness and friendship. Gregory saw everything from his house. He didn't say anything, but Keanu knew he was watching. Over the next few weeks, Gregory noticed more people coming to Keanu's house. A single mom whose car Keanu had fixed when it broke down. A teenage boy who worked at a small diner Keanu visited. People from all walks of life. Kind people, good people. Keanu's backyard had turned into a place of kindness and community. Gregory watched, his smirk slowly disappearing. He had thought he could push Keanu around, but now he saw something different. Keanu wasn't fighting back with anger. He was fighting back with love. Then, something even more surprising happened. One evening, Gregory's wife, Margaret, walked over to Keanu's house. She was holding a small dish covered in foil. "I made some homemade pie," she said softly. Her voice shook a little, like she was nervous. Keanu gave her a warm smile and opened the gate. "Thank you," he said. As she stepped inside, she saw the people sitting around the pool. The retired stuntman was talking with the single mom. The teenage boy was skipping stones across the water. The place felt warm and peaceful. Margaret stood there, holding the pie like it was the most important thing in the world. There was something sad in her eyes. Keanu noticed right away. "Would you like to sit?" he asked kindly, leading her to a table by the pool. As they sat, Margaret finally spoke. "I'm sorry." Keanu tilted his head. "For what?" "For what Gregory said." "For what he's done," she whispered. "He's not always like this. Or maybe he is, and I've just been pretending not to see it." Her eyes filled with tears. Keanu didn't interrupt. He just listened. That was one of the things he did best. Margaret sighed. She told Keanu how Gregory had changed over the years. How he used to be kind and hopeful, but then he became bitter. He was angry at the world for moving forward without him. He resented people like Keanu, people who seemed to have everything. And he looked down on anyone who didn't fit into his small idea of how the world should be. "You're not what he says you are," Margaret whispered. "And I hate that he tries to make you seem that way." Keanu's voice was soft but firm. "Hate is a heavy thing to carry," he said. "But so is regret." Margaret wiped away a tear. They sat there in silence, two people bound by the pain Gregory had caused. As the days passed, Gregory started to notice something. He watched from the window as Keanu's backyard stayed full of people. Not rich or famous people, just good people. They gathered, talked, and laughed. More than that, Gregory noticed his wife leaving the house more often. She wasn't going to gossip with neighbors. She was going to Keanu's house. Sometimes she brought over small dishes of food. Sometimes she just sat by the pool in quiet peace. Then one evening, Gregory finally spoke up. His voice was rough and angry as he confronted Margaret in the kitchen. "Why do you keep going over there?" he demanded. Margaret looked at him, her expression unreadable. "Because it feels like home," she said simply. Gregory didn't know what to say. He had spent so long pushing people away, holding on to his bitterness. But now he saw his wife slipping through his fingers, drawn to something he didn't understand, kindness. And as he stood there in his empty house, watching the warm glow from Keanu's backyard, for the first time in a long while, Gregory felt truly alone. He shouted, "What do you see in him?" Margaret's answer was not loud, but it hurt more than any yelling ever could. "I see someone who is everything you're not anymore," she said softly. "I see kindness." Those words felt like a mirror breaking inside Gregory. It made him see something he had been ignoring for a long time. A few nights later, something surprising happened. It was just past midnight when Keanu heard a soft knock on his door. When he opened it, Gregory was standing there. He looked tired and messy. His usual smirk was gone. Instead, he looked almost sad. "I don't know why I'm here," Gregory muttered, running a hand through his graying hair. I guess I wanted to say I'm sorry." Keanu didn't say anything at first. He looked at Gregory's face, noticing the tired lines and the sadness in his eyes. After a long pause, Keanu stepped aside. "Do you want to sit by the pool?" he asked. And just like that, the man who used to be angry and mean to Keanu now sat beside him, looking at the same pool he once thought was only his. They didn't talk much that night. Gregory didn't explain why he was always so angry, and Keanu didn't ask him to. They just sat there, two men who had once been on opposite sides, now sharing the same quiet space. Sometimes, the hardest battles are the ones inside our own hearts. The night air was cool. The pool was still like a mirror. Keanu and Gregory sat side by side. There was still tension between them, but it wasn't anger anymore. It was something else. Something quieter. Something that felt like a wall slowly breaking down. Gregory's hands shook a little as they rested on his knees. It was small, but Keanu noticed. Keanu noticed everything. The way Gregory's jaw tightened. The way he breathed steadily but with effort. The way his eyes kept looking at the pool as if the water could give him answers. Minutes passed. Maybe even hours. Finally, Gregory spoke. His voice was barely a whisper. "I wasn't always like this, you know." Keanu didn't answer right away. He let the words settle, giving Gregory the space to continue. "I used to be different," Gregory said, still looking at the water. "Before I lost my job. Before I almost lost my house. Before everything felt like it was slipping away." He swallowed hard, trying to hold back the emotions inside him. "I used to have friends. Real friends. I used to laugh without feeling like the world was laughing at me." Keanu's voice, when it finally came, was soft. "What changed?" Gregory's face twisted into something between a sad smile and a frown. "Life," he said, his voice bitter. "Life changed." And there it was. The quiet confession of a man who had been broken by the world. He wasn't making excuses. He wasn't asking for pity. He was just telling the truth. Keanu leaned back in his chair, his fingers tapping lightly on the armrest. "Life changes for all of us," he murmured. "But it doesn't have to change who we are." The words hit Gregory hard. His throat tightened, and for the first time in years he felt tears threaten to spill. Silence filled the air again. But this time it wasn't heavy. It felt lighter. A few days passed and something changed. Keanu's backyard remained the same, a quiet place where he welcomed people who needed it. But now there was a new person among them, Gregory. At first, Gregory stayed at the edges of the gatherings. He didn't know where he fit in. He didn't talk much. He just nodded when Keanu handed him a drink. He mumbled a quiet thank you when Margaret gave him a plate of food. But then, something surprising happened. A teenage boy, one Keanu had helped years ago, started talking to Gregory about baseball. A retired stuntman asked Gregory if he had ever worked in movies. Little by little, Gregory found himself being pulled in. Not because he forced his way in, but because Keanu's group didn't see him as the angry man he once was. They saw him as someone who was trying to change. One evening, as the sun set and the sky turned pink and orange, Gregory stood by the pool again. But this time he wasn't an outsider. He was a guest. Keanu stood beside him, their reflections rippling in the water. "I don't deserve this," Gregory muttered, his voice hoarse. "I don't deserve any of this." Keanu didn't look away from the water. "Maybe not," he said softly. "But that doesn't mean you can't earn it." The words hung in the air. They weren't a punishment. They weren't a warning. They were an invitation. A quiet offer to step out of the darkness and into something better. And then, something unexpected happened. Keanu turned to Gregory with a small smile. "I could use some help around here," he said. "Fixing the fence. Setting up lights for the next gathering." Gregory blinked. "You want me to help?" Keanu nodded. "Only if you want to." It wasn't a grand moment. It wasn't a dramatic forgiveness. It was just a simple offer. One man reaching out to another. Not because he had to, but because he believed that people could change. And so, Gregory found himself coming back. Not because he felt guilty. Not because he had to, but because he wanted to. Day by day he helped Keanu fix the fence. He strung up lights. He carried food. And in those small moments, in those quiet exchanges with Keanu, in the way Margaret's smile softened each time she saw him trying, Gregory realized something. He wasn't just rebuilding Keanu's backyard. He was rebuilding himself. The nights grew warmer. The backyard changed. The broken fence Gregory had helped fix now stood strong. The lights he had strung glowed gently in the dark. The once quiet gatherings were now filled with laughter and stories. But something bigger was changing. Not in the backyard. In Gregory. One quiet afternoon, Gregory stood alone by the pool, staring at his reflection in the water. His hands, once rough from anger, were now rough from work. From fixing things. From building something new. Something real. He still didn't understand why Keanu had let him in. Why, after everything he had said and done, he wasn't pushed away. But the more time he spent around Keanu, the more he understood something. Keanu didn't fight hate with hate. He didn't fight anger with louder words. He fought it with kindness. He met every broken piece of Gregory with patience and understanding. Instead of pushing Gregory away, he offered him a place to heal. One evening, as the sun dipped below the hills, Gregory stood by the grill, flipping burgers with Travis, the stuntman. Lucas, the teenage boy, tossed a ball with a stray dog Keanu had taken in. Margaret chatted with Emma, a single mother who had become a regular guest. And then there was Keanu, standing in the corner of the yard, smiling his soft, knowing smile. Gregory took a deep breath. He had spent so long fighting against the world, pushing people away. But now, for the first time in a long time, he felt something different. He felt at home. Gregory looked at Keanu, and for a moment they just stared at each other. They weren't angry. They weren't upset. They just understood something about each other. Later that night, when most of the guests had left, Gregory stayed behind. The pool water shimmered under the light, casting little waves of color across the patio. Keanu was picking up empty glasses, moving slowly, like he wasn't in a hurry at all. Gregory cleared his throat and spoke. "I don't get it," he said, his voice rough but steady. "Why did you let me stay after everything?" Keanu didn't answer right away. He finished putting the last glass on the table, wiped his hands on a towel, and finally looked at Gregory. "Because people aren't just at their worst moments," Keanu said gently. "We all feel anger, pain, and regret. But that's not all we are." Gregory felt something inside him crack, not his tough, angry shell, but the wall that stopped him from telling the truth. He was tired. Tired of fighting. Tired of being mad. Tired of feeling alone even when people were around him. Then Keanu added softly, "I've been there too." Those words hit Gregory hard. For so long he had thought Keanu was perfect. The famous movie star who had everything. But in that one sentence, Gregory saw something else. He saw a man who had also been through hard times but still chose to be kind. The next morning, Gregory woke up earlier than he had in years. He found himself standing at his backyard fence, looking at Keanu's yard. The pool was still. The chairs were stacked neatly. The lights swayed gently in the wind. And for the first time in a long while, Gregory felt something new inside him. Hope. Over the next few weeks, Gregory started showing up more. Not just at Keanu's gatherings but in his own life. He fixed the broken step on his front porch. He helped his wife, Margaret, plant a small garden. He even started talking to Lucas, the teenage boy from the neighborhood, about baseball whenever he passed by. One afternoon, Gregory found himself standing at Keanu's gate again. But this time he wasn't there to argue or apologize. He was there for something else. "I was thinking," Gregory said, shifting nervously, "maybe we could build a bench by the pool. You know, so people can sit." Keanu smiled, a soft smile that always seemed to say more than words. "That sounds like a great idea," he said. And just like that, Gregory, the man who had once been filled with anger, now stood beside Keanu, not as an enemy but as a neighbor, as a friend. The days passed, then weeks, and something special began to happen. Not just in Keanu's backyard, but in Gregory's heart. The man who used to see the world through anger was changing. It was slow, like the sunrise creeping over the horizon, but it was happening. The bench that Gregory suggested wasn't just a bench. It was a sign of something bigger. He and Keanu worked together, sanding the wood, staining it a warm brown, and placing it by the pool where the sun set beautifully every evening. Gregory, who used to use harsh words and closed fists, now worked carefully, focused and calm. But the change wasn't just outside. It was happening in his home too. Margaret, who had lived with Gregory's anger for so long, started seeing the man she had loved again. He asked about her garden. He helped water the plants. He even started cooking dinner sometimes. Simple meals but thoughtful ones. The silence at their dinner table, which used to be heavy and cold, now felt warm and hopeful. One evening, as the sun painted the sky orange and pink, Keanu found Gregory standing by the pool again. But this time he wasn't angry or lost in thought. He was just watching the light dance on the water. The new bench stood beside him, fitting perfectly in the peaceful backyard. "You did a good job," Keanu said softly, nodding toward the bench. Gregory chuckled, a sound that felt strange to him but also nice. "Yeah, well, I had a pretty patient teacher." There was a small pause before Gregory spoke again, this time with real honesty. "I was so angry for so long, Keanu. At the world. At people like you. People who seemed to have everything I didn't." He swallowed. "But you never threw it back at me. Even when you could have." Keanu's eyes, steady and kind, didn't look away. "Anger is heavy," he said. "But it's even heavier when you carry it alone." Gregory's throat tightened. No one had ever said that to him before, not without judgment, not without expecting something in return. Then something unexpected happened. Lucas, the teenage boy, walked into the backyard tossing a baseball in the air. Without thinking, Gregory caught the ball and smiled, a real easy smile. "You still throw like a rookie," he teased. Lucas laughed. "And you still talk like an old man." Keanu watched them with quiet happiness. The man who had once been broken was now connecting again, one small moment at a time. A few weeks later, Keanu hosted another big gathering. More people came this time. Emma with her daughter. Travis with his wife. Lucas with his younger siblings. The backyard was filled with laughter and conversation. The pool reflected the soft glow of string lights. And right in the middle of it all was Gregory, standing by the grill, flipping burgers and joking around. Margaret stood beside him, smiling. She wasn't watching him with worry anymore. She was watching the man she had once fallen in love with, the man who was finally coming back to himself. Later that night, when things had quieted down, Gregory sat alone on the new bench. His fingers traced the wood, and for the first time in years, his heart felt light. Keanu walked over, hands in his pockets, and smiled his familiar soft smile. "You know," Gregory said after a long pause, "I used to think you were the guy who had everything. The money, the fame, the perfect life." Keanu's smile faded just a little. "But now I see," Gregory continued, his voice softer, "it's not about what you have. It's about what you give." Keanu didn't answer right away. He didn't need to. The words hung between them, heavy but meaningful. Gregory let out a small laugh, not bitter, not forced, just real. "Guess we were building more than just a bench, huh?" Keanu chuckled. "Guess we both were." And for the first time in years, Gregory didn't feel like an outsider looking in on a life he wanted. He felt like a man who was finally stepping into his own. The night ended with Gregory and Margaret walking home hand in hand. Not because everything was perfect, but because they were finally moving forward, together. And Keanu, standing by the pool with the new bench beside him, looked up at the stars, feeling quietly happy. Because sometimes change doesn't come from big fights or loud words. Sometimes it comes from a simple bench by a pool. A kind hand offered without expecting anything in return. And a neighbor who chose to build something stronger than a fence. And even though the night ended, the story of healing, friendship, and kindness would never really end. If you enjoyed this story, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and let me know what you think. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more exciting stories filled with adventure, mystery, and unforgettable moments. Your support means the world. It keeps these stories coming and the creativity flowing. Thanks for watching, and I can't wait to see you in the next video.